You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. And I have with me a kind of amazing man. His name is Asaf, but we're going to call him Ace. And I am not even going to try your last name. So want to do that for me?
Mengelgrein.
There you go, Mengelgrein. I got it.
I apologize.
Not a problem. And we were having an amazing conversation before we got started here. And so I said, wait, we need to record this. This is just so beautiful. And we're talking about the lies that we have all bought into. And if any of you are following me at all, you know that I frequently talk about the lies. So Ace, welcome to the Empowering Process podcast.
Thank you, Gail. So happy to be here.
Oh my God, it's just so great. So I first want to just kind of touch base on what happened to you that you decided to get curious about what is truth after all?
Well, when you realize that life isn't working out the way you thought it would, and for me, it was at the age of 40 when I was born to myself. I like to say I was born in 75 to my parents, but in 2015, I was born to myself. That was when I hit my bottom. That's when everything I had tried failed, and it all came to a head. And the fundamental error was me, that I was not seeking my own truth, and I was following the expectations of others, primarily my parents, coming from a Jewish family where things were very strict. And of course, society and all this programming that we've got going on. And it didn't work. And it failed me miserably, which resulted in a divorce and financial failures, social failures. And I came to that fork in the road, that proverbial fork in the road, where either I was going to start living or end my life. And I chose to start living because I had two little boys and my parents who loved me. And that's where I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I needed to begin somewhere. So I had to educate myself. And what I did was I began to read. I read a lot about personal growth and development, a lot about spiritualism, about the Kabbalah, about the sciences, because I have a science background, just about how humans socially function, social experiments, which I found to be fascinating. And I did this for a good year or two consistently. And in the process, I realized I want to become a speaker and I wanted to pass this knowledge because I enjoy speaking. And one thing I've learned in the Kabbalah, it is receiving for the sake of sharing. We have to be selfless and we must share. And my way to share everything that I learn is by speaking to you and to your audience, and by writing the book that I'm putting out, and by speaking through different organizations. And this all was starting to learn who I am and what my purpose is, and reading and learning a lot by those who were far smarter and greater from way back then and current today, and gleaming off of their wisdom, and then reinterpreting it in a way that made sense to me and was woven within my life story so I could share it with others. Because as I've learned through the Toastmaster organization, stories sell, facts tell. So my story has its place in it, but really the bigger story is this greater truth that has been around since the beginning of time. And it's unfortunately been masked with a lot of lies and propaganda and what have you for all sorts of reasons, none of which are to benefit you and I and our audience, unfortunately.
And that is so true. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is that I've been on an intentional quest to uncover lies, right? And I'm a soul realignment practitioner. And in that process for myself, I discovered my soul blueprint includes truth. I am compelled, I cannot tell you a lie. I physically cannot do
Mm.
it. I am truth. And I'll tell you, at the age of 7 or 8, I can remember, I grew up in the streets of Boston. I can remember walking around the neighborhood thinking, I'm not from here.
Mm.
This is not real. This is my dream state. I want to go back home.
Mm.
Right. And I had no one I could talk to help me understand what awareness was just hitting me at that point.
Mm.
Right. And so what do is we bury it, right? We pretend it's not happening. And there are so many other things that I buried because society would go, you're in fact, I've been called a witch by my own sister, right? Because of the things that I am capable of doing. Um, and it's not magic,
No.
it's who we are. And when we start to step into the truth of who we are, magic happens. What we consider magic, because we can't scientifically yet explain it. Quantum physics is getting there.
Slowly but surely,
Yes.
yes. That's right. Interesting you say that when you were young, how you identified as not of where you were. I had something similar when I was young, this reoccurring feeling that I did not belong. And I know a lot of young children feel that they don't belong. We could label it generically as an outcast, but
Yeah, but that
children,
wasn't it.
that's not what it is. That's the layman's safe word. Oh, that's just an outcast. Maybe that's not an outcast. Maybe that's a child who's truly more in touch with source, and they just don't understand this disassociation from where they really are, the present reality, if we can call it that, and what's they really feel intuitively inside. For many years as a child, I felt that I didn't belong. I have journal entries when I was in 5th grade saying, I am wood, girls are metal, we don't get, and there was such a theme of me not belonging. And so many years later, I look back and God, I think I had it right back then.
We did.
And, I did, you did, and a lot of children do. But parents who have already been washed over with all the challenges of life don't often promote that sense that we have as children, that sixth sense, if you will. And it's obviously we don't want to label our children as weirdos or anything like that. So we tend to shun these things and mask it with rules and authority and all sorts of things like that. And eventually kids grow up and it kind of gets put in the back of their minds, but you end up growing handicapped, as I did up until my rebirth.
Hmm.
And eventually you have, call it a midlife crisis or a come to Jesus moment, where you realize, oh shit, this is what kind of life have I been living? Because this cannot be it. This isn't
This,
working.
this cannot be it. And what's frightening, I think, to some people who aren't ready to face the reality of
Mhm.
who and what we are, that means that my house doesn't matter, my Mercedes doesn't matter, my VP position doesn't matter. Well, that's true. It doesn't matter. It's something that you manifested, and that's beautiful that you manifested that.
Yeah.
But in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter at all. If it was taken away, so for example, today's and you and I, how we got here today is a perfect example. You've got stitches in your mouth, you're barely able to talk. I lost electricity. I have wires running and cords running in order to get juice so that we can have this conversation, right? And life happens. And if we have a desire, then we shift to address the need that we're looking for. when we are hang on to the falseness of our belief, we're not able to adjust, right? We're not able to change, right? The fear of losing what we have. I have a sister who literally said to me, I had a conversation with her about life is changing, and yes, things are happening, and they're happening faster and faster and faster. You really need to get in tune with who you are. And she said, Gail, I'm just going to stay in my little world. I just can't handle that. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how the world is going to change, but I'm just going to stay in my little world. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah. How's that working for her?
not really cool.
That
But it's her
little,
comfort.
but that little world gets smaller and smaller.
Oh, it's so small.
Yeah, because life keeps happening, and you look around and you see others who do see the light and do progress, and your world becomes smaller and smaller until it collapses. That's what happened to me. It was the breaking point. It got
Right?
so small that it was at that point it wasn't worth living anymore. And that was the choice I had to make. I knew that Ace 1.0 was going to be killed. I was either
One way
going
or
to,
another.
one way or another, Ace 1.0 was dead and dying at the age of 40. And I chose to kill and then be reborn versus just kill and that's it.
Oh, well, let's talk about that, because that's what's going on right now. A lot of people are feeling anxious, anger. Things are coming up. People who are just on this journey have a lot of cleansing to do, and they're being faced with their past. And it's like a death. I had a spiritualist tell me in December, he goes, "You're going to go through a death right now, Gail, because I went through it before this time. It's just your life passing before you. It's just so that you can release whatever's left."
Mm.
And that's what's happening. As things come up, you have a choice of hanging on to your old story and replaying it, or saying, well, geez, that happened when I was 8 and I'm 58 now. I think we'll let that go.
Mm.
Right? And you have a choice of letting it go or hanging on. And if you hang on, you're not going to grow. You're not going to expand. You cannot with that weight. And so we're being given the opportunity to face the lies, to face the stories and say, that, man, that is just a story. Just a story. I'll give you another example, and then I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I know your head is turning like crazy right now. I can see it. So I had someone call me about an interaction with their boyfriend, and every time, I think I have to have a conversation with him about how he addresses my son. She's divorced, and her son is driving age, but doesn't have a car. Her ex promised to get him a car and hasn't. And so that means they're carting him around or lending him a car or whatever. So he had the father's car and had to return the car, which meant she had to go with him to bring him back. Right. Well, her boyfriend was around that night, which meant he would have to come. And he was, oh, right, had this attitude about it. And so I said, well, I look at this, and this is what I mean about a lie. Look at things from a bunch of different perspectives. My perspective of that situation is different. I said, this has nothing to do with your son. You have a drama going on with your ex, where you always are the one picking up after him because you're concerned about your son. Well, now you're in a relationship, and every time that you have to drop things and pick things up, it impacts your relationship. So his issue is not your son. His issue is your relationship with your ex. And she went, oh my goodness. Never even thought to look at it that way. And that's what happens with our lies. We buy them, buy the stories, hook, line, and sinker, and never ask, well, is there another perspective? Is there something else going on here? Maybe. What if this wasn't true? What if I changed the story? Right?
What's the one thing we are pretending not to know, my friend?
That's right. Thank you.
What are you pretending not to know?
No, to think you have had this problem. I love that question.
because it's not such a stretch of the imagination to think, well, maybe my issue is, with her, with my that significant other.
Right.
But again, there are layers that are put on us, and they manipulate our ability to see reason, to use our reason. And it's not for our betterment. And we tend to then take it out on other people, if not ourselves. We take it out on other people. And I noticed that too. I mean, I'm divorced 10 years now, and the first 5 years of it was not simple with my ex. And if I had issues with her, it would immediately funnel and translate into my children and my ability to parent. To this day, if not just in anything in my personal or private life, professional life, if it irritates me, I become a jerk to my children, and I can cognitively get ahead of it because I've been there so many times, and I have to stop myself and realize, whoa, stop. They are not the issue. So and so upset you, and right now you are driven by impulse and certain desires to satisfy the ego. And the Kabbalah talks a lot about the ego, how bad the ego, serves only its self-interest. And you have to get ahead of yourself cognitively, because our bodies are animalistic, and they have certain functions that, call it through nature and evolution and survival, make us behave in certain ways. But then flip to the other side, that we are also living in a society, and we have to function together, and we're also spirits that have a certain desire. And that yin and yang, the plus and the minus, right? And then in the center is the will, our willpower to make those decisions, to see those sides. The enlightened can step out of themselves and see things from above or from the side, and not let the animal take over, not let the ego take over, not let the programming take over. It's not so easy to do that. And when that switch flips, when I was reborn, when people have that come to Jesus moment, the switch is instantaneous. But for that new light to turn on, the speed of light is all relative and is only there created to give time for us to think. The Kabbalah speaks of that. It can take years for that light to hit you, even though you flip that switch, at this moment. This is a long process. It is always a work in process. I think to be ultimately enlightened is to be instantaneous at any moment to anything, and not be seduced by the wrong programming, by our animalistic biology, which even now I am not perfect by any means, but I am certainly light years from where I was. And that still is a process that I work on.
And which we all work on. And I will say that this saying, be here now, right? Comes to mind so frequently right now. And it's easier said than done. That it's about that awareness that you were talking about, that awareness, that observe yourself and ask yourself, okay, my body is feeling an emotion.
Right.
My body is being triggered. So what if I take that emotion, and maybe it's a ball, maybe it's a glass, maybe it's a ruler, I don't know, take that emotion out and look at it and say, well, you're there and I'm here now. What story am I writing without the emotion in my body? Ooh, it's a different story, right? Right. And oftentimes the story that's truly happening in this moment has nothing to do with the emotion that you just were able to take out of the mix, if you will. Now, I'm not saying that the hurt child doesn't need to be acknowledged, right? And I'm not saying don't acknowledge your pain, because that's like ignoring yourself, right? That's still ignoring yourself.
Right.
right? And it's still pushing down, and you're just rooting it some more if you push it down, and you're feeding it fodder, right? But it is really observing it and saying, so this happened when I was 8. It didn't just happen now. So, okay, so acknowledge this happened when I was 8 and I feel this way about it, but that has nothing to do with what's going on in this moment,
Right.
right? And it's a way for us to learn to keep our history as history. Acknowledge that, yes, I'm who I am because I had these experiences, and thank you for the good and the tough ones. The tougher the experience, the bigger the growth, right?
You use the word story. You use the word history. Culture is really the story that we tell each other. That is culture.
Yep.
And throughout history, our culture has been the stories that we tell each other. And too often, we are not telling one another the right stories. And that affects the culture. We do need to acknowledge those that are hurting because they're usually lost. So they need both comfort, but they also need a form of realism to snap them out of it. And they are in a good state to receive, because when someone is hurt and vulnerable, they are more accessible. They say with good times come good friends, but when it rains, it pours. So you really want to know who somebody is. Times need to get tough.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got a friend who's doing amazing, but they're certainly not enlightened, and they're in the dark on many things, but if they're doing well in life by their standards and by standards of the many, you can't talk to them. They are on a roll and they're living it up, and there's no entry point to access them with any kind of new knowledge. Somebody who is vulnerable usually is weakened enough where the walls can come down a bit, and together with comfort and wisdom, you can access them. And that is why some of the greatest of everything that takes place comes from a point of challenges, from misery, from heartache. As a musician, the greatest music I can write is in my lowest points in life. Why is that? Why? It's because that's when your ego is at most in check.
Right.
And when the ego is in check or currently booted out of your being, then the light comes out. And that's when you're in the zone, right?
Right.
And this magic comes through you that you can't even expect. When my marriage was ending, before I left the home, this is 10 years ago, I had all of a sudden this flood of creative juices that came through me. And I wrote like 4 or 5 songs within days. And those songs were predicting my future. One talked about where I was then. One made perfect sense a year and a half later. One 4 years later. One like now is coming to light. But only in my lowest points where all my ego is out. And I'm not going to say give up, but when I surrender to the universe, that's when the universe says, thank you. Here you go.
And
because
that's
the
the
universe, right?
go ahead. That's the phrase, let go and be free.
Right, because that greatness, what was I saying earlier that Kabbalist Rav Berg said? He said, rather than chase after the light, we must find and identify all the curtains that conceal the light that is always there.
Right.
But if you don't stop for a moment to realize all of those curtains that are there, you're never going to notice that light. And all of these layers that we're talking about, the theme of this conversation, these layers of lies that we want to peel back, these are all the curtains. And a lot of it is propelled and it's thriving within our own ego. And we need to get ahead of that to be able to remove those curtains. And one way is when we're really hurt and suffering. That is a great way to check yourself, is when you're down and out.
Because that's when you say, how did I get here?
Right.
Right. I can, and I've been there a few times, right? For various reasons and for various lessons, right? I can honestly say that at this point in my life, when I realize that ego is there, ego is part of who I am, so I don't discount ego. Ego is definitely here for a purpose, but ego's not the boss, right? So,
Shouldn't be.
right? So, but usually it is. So when I am reacting versus responding, I will check and say, okay, ego, thank you very much for your input. I will take it in consideration. You can now get out of the decision-making process,
Right.
right? It's just a point of data. It's not all of the data. And then step back and observe. I like to tell my clients, pretend that you're a reporter and you're watching the event of your life play out. What would
Mm.
that reporter who has no emotional attachment to what's happening, no expectations, no judgment of the people, what would they say is happening? Different
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, you have to be a professional, right? You have to be a professional of your own life. And a professional doesn't get emotional and they don't bring their opinion into it. A true reporter, which we don't have so many nowadays, a journalist,
Right?
doesn't bring their side of it. We don't care about. They're there to report on the facts
Yep.
and only the facts on every side of the story.
Right. I can remember telling someone about a client, and again, no names, but I was talking about how we went through the process of getting his values out so that we were sure that he was making choices around his personal values. And one of his values is in his workplace, he wants good-looking women around him. That's
Mm.
important to him. And this person said, "Well, that's shallow." I said, "It's none of my business what's a value of my clients. I don't care." This was important to him. So we put it on the list. It was something for him to check off. None of
Right,
my business what he likes and doesn't like, nor is it any of my business what you like,
right. And
right?
that's ego. And that's ego that says that.
Right, right, right. And that's judgment and that's expectations, right?
Right,
And the thing is, again, the Kabbalah is going to tell you judgment is part of what we do, of who we are, in order to make choices. Free will can't make a choice if we can't judge versus
right,
being judgmental.
right,
Being the judge, balancing the scales, right? And understanding all of the universal laws. The universal law of polarity is my favorite. Can't have up without down. You can't have black without white. You can't have good times without bad. You
correct.
cannot. Now, if you're living forever in the bad times, you're still living on the good time line of polarity. You're just at that end of it. You're not
Right.
at the other end of it. So, what small step can you make to go to the other end? Just start going up the other end of the timeline. Don't stay stuck there. It's your choice, right? And again, yeah,
Identify the curtains, right?
yeah,
Identify the curtains.
right.
That's right. And people are looking for the magic pill, the magic
Mhm.
bullet, uh, because that seems to be the easy way. But that's not the way. The way is identify the curtains. What is handicapping you that's preventing you from going from the negative to the positive? Ah, okay. Well, we don't want to go there now because now we're really going to start nitpicking at your faults. And people don't want to do that.
Or or they're so attached to other people's opinions. Oh, yes,
Mm.
it's other people's judgments. And I had a woman who almost did a podcast with me. And I said to her, I said, "I love your story, but there's a root to why you made these choices. And the root of the story is really what's important to people for people to hear." And she says, I can't tell that story. It would hurt my mother's feelings."
But
Well,
that is
yeah,
living to other people's expectations.
right.
One of
And
the
you never win that game.
No, you don't, because you're not living true to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a false premise. I really feel sorry for those kind of people that stick to that, because not only is she letting herself down, she's even letting her mother down, assuming she's alive and watching down wherever she is. We are all here supposed to be as individuals. We are all unique in our own ways. But if we prevent us from being who we are because we don't want to offend someone or to let someone down, someone dear to us, it is not only an injustice to us and to them, but to this world and universe, because all of us, there again, Kabbalah, there's a plus and minus. And if all of us can be in the positive, we really ultimately hit this ascension where we truly all become something greater, whatever that thing is. We cannot do that if we tie ourselves to other people's expectations. That is extremely unhealthy. I like to say the greatest speech ever told is the one I've never told, because that is the deepest thing that I have not shared. And people need to be able to go to that deepest thing and bring that out.
Someone
That
needs
is
to hear it. Someone needs to hear it.
that person themselves needs to hear it. It needs to come out of them. When we talked the other day, my first step to beginning to love myself, to beginning to stop hating myself, was to face myself in the mirror.
Yes.
And people don't do that because they don't want to say the things that need to be said. And the safest place you can do it is on your own, in front of the mirror. And as easy as that is, it's still extremely hard. And it's just you in the mirror. But most people won't do that. Here's another take on it. Forget the mirror. Sit down and write down your own eulogy. Write down your own eulogy. I proposed that in the newsletter, and one person came to me. She's like, I can't do that. I'm not ready. And this was an older woman. I said, really? I said, well, when you are ready, let me know. And if you can't write it down, why don't you ask your friend to write down your eulogy? What would they say about you? Because that is, again, a come to Jesus moment where you have to face the reality of, who am I? What is my legacy? What am I really about? Do I like me? Am I fucking up somewhere?
Well,
What's wrong?
and honestly, Ace, this whole journey that I'm on started because I couldn't stand who I saw in the mirror.
Agreed.
I looked in the mirror one day and I literally said, if I can't stand you, I'm surprised you have any friends. How can anyone else stand you if I can't? Something's going to change, and it's going to start now.
Yeah. When you're sick and tired of your own bullshit,
Yeah.
that's when change begins to happen.
Right.
But a lot of people don't get there because they won't let themselves get there, because they know what'll happen. They'll have to confront themselves, and it won't be pretty. And when I confronted myself in front of the mirror, it wasn't pretty. And it was weeks that I would yell at myself in the mirror.
Mhm.
I learned this from somewhere, I don't remember. And every morning I would get in front of the mirror and I'd look at this man in the mirror who I despised because I thought he was a loser and a failure and nothing worthy. And the worst things I could say that came out of my belly came out in a yell. And I would yell 30, 45 seconds at the top of my lungs until my throat would hurt. And then the next day I would do it again, and then again and again. And I did this for weeks. And then one day, this was the beginning of the switch. I looked at this man in the mirror and I felt something different. And we're going to talk about feelings, because feelings is huge. I felt sympathy for the man in the mirror. That day, I didn't want to yell at him anymore. And that was the beginning of stopping to hate myself. Loving didn't happen for at least 4 years probably after that.
Right.
But the hate began to end that day. I didn't need to yell at me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now I could look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And that was the turning point. But it wasn't like a snap of the fingers and, oh, we're all good, and, one little session. No, it was weeks and weeks of berating myself. So who's ever on that precipice of, are they ready to face themselves? Just know this. It's a process. It could take days, weeks, and months. But I promise you that on the other side of it, that self-loathing you have will diminish and go away, which will then create space for love to enter. You still have to work for that, and there's a process and tools and mythology, but you have to create space in order for something new to have. It's like a habit. You can't just go cold turkey without swapping in one habit for another, because then there will be a vacuum, and we don't do well in vacuums. Because if we have vacuum, trust us, someone will plug that vacuum in with something to benefit them and not you. And that's a promise.
That's an absolute promise, an absolute promise. And we've danced around the lies. We've not been specific about the lies. There's so many, and I will tell you, this past Christmas, I'm going to tell you about one lie that I was like, oh my goodness, there it is. I went with some family members to a Christian ceremony for Christmas. Now I'm Jewish, so I go because it's kind of fun. They sing and they light candles and all this kind of stuff.
I love Christmas.
Yep. So the pastor starts talking about, right now we're in the middle of dark times, and we were, and he was right, because we were coming through to this. We're now getting ready to ascend, right? Very dark times because the garbage is coming up for us to address. And I go, yeah, he's right. But everything he said after that was a lie. There's only one way forward. You have to wrap yourself around Jesus, and the only thing that's going to heal you. Yada 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 yada. I'm like, no. I was taught there's more than one road to Mecca, right? So there's more than one way to get to heaven, if you will. And yes, these are dark times, and the only way to heal is to look at yourself in the mirror and heal.
Right.
You can call on Jesus if you want. Sure, you can call on, Buddha. You can call on, anyone, any energy if you want, if you need to, for assistance.
Right.
But bottom line, it's you in the mirror.
And that's where they lose me, when they go there. You hit the nail on the head, huh?
Mm-hmm.
When they like that one solution, and this is the way. No.
Yeah.
That's where you lost me. Sorry, and the Kabbalah even says religion is man-made.
Yes.
Religion is man-made version of the higher wisdom that exists. The Kabbalah is spiritualistic. It's not a religion. People think it is, but it isn't. And it doesn't preach anything about religion. And it even says that there was nothing ordained by God saying that you must have religion on this earth. That was not in the programming. That's something that man made up. And we can talk about what we said earlier, the 150 people rule. If you want to be able to control a large group of people, they must subscribe to a certain thing. And what that pastor, whoever was, said, well, what he said, that stems from that.
Right.
And that was that programming. And I don't buy into it, but look, millions and millions of people do. And it does keep a lot of people in line. So, there are some benefits to these lies, because otherwise people might be more lost and prone to doing more terrible things. And that's maybe this dichotomy of how you handle these lies. Some of it is necessary, because not everybody's ready to be unplugged. So it's a fine line. I think the Kabbalah does it well, because it doesn't preach this like singledom type of mindset. No, it is much larger. And it's a growing trend, thank goodness. But yeah, I agree with you. That's where I would be lost too.
Right.
But I could see, but I understand why that would be said, and I can understand why that person would say it. Again, it's we have the awareness, and I can pull the nuggets out from such conversations and just let the rest aside. Because again, ego, right? Ego gets in the way, and ego will say, "Oh man, that's a liar. I'm not listening." No. I get it, and he's just still human, and
Mhm.
we all
And
have
this is his story that
exactly.
right, and again, here's the judgment thing. There was no judgment in any of that. It was my, oh, well, there's a lie. And it was at that moment that I could see the nugget of truth in
Right.
the middle of the lies that we've been fed. It was at that moment that I became aware of, this is how we bought into the lies, because I'm like, how did we do that? This is how, because there's enough truth that we will say, yes, it is dark times, and now you're feeding me the lies, but I just said a yes. And psychology will tell you that if you can get a yes, you pretty much can bring that person along.
Marketing 101,
Right?
identify a common problem and then offer some bullshit solution for $19.99, buy one, get one free, order now, limited supply.
Oh, and you know what? If you get on my membership, right, and every month I'll give you a new tool, because if
That's
that one
it.
doesn't work, the next one will.
Okay. Right. That and look, and it works. It
Mhm.
works.
It does.
Look, most people aren't ready to be unplugged. But you and I and people like us need to continue to share in this wisdom. I think that is our calling. I think when we are gifted this awareness, we must pay it forward. Again, the Kabbalah says, that there is receiving, which is selfish, but you could receive for the sake of sharing. There's a really good story, a fable that's told in those circles, the Meisner, I think it's called. And so you've got this very wealthy Scrooge type man. He's not a good man, but very wealthy. And he leaves his office one day, and there's this homeless man sitting there on the floor. And he throws at him like whatever, a few nickels his way, and without much care. And the man takes the coins, the poor man, and comes up to him, sir, and gives him the money back. He says, "Thank you, but I cannot accept this. I've accepted my fate. I will make my own way." And this rich man is stunned, like, God, who is this guy? He says, no. He says, no, you take it. The poor man, no, I cannot, but thank you. Now the rich man is offended, and he takes out his checkbook and writes this fat check to the man, and he says, you take this now. And he holds his check and he says, thank you, sir. I really appreciate your kindness, but I cannot take this. I will find my own way. And gives him back the check. And in that moment, this rich, angry man all of a sudden feels embarrassed and humbled at the same time, and feels that he has made a wrong in his life. And in that same moment, the poor man notices this switch in this rich man, and it says, sir, I've had a change of mind. I will accept your kindness, and I very much appreciate what you are doing for me. And the lesson is this, because in that exchange, at the very end, it was two winners. Both were in a position to share. In the beginning, it was a wealthy man who cared little for this other man and threw money his way. Had that man accepted the money, he would have been selfish, because he would have received without sharing, because that other man would have received no joy from it. So he did not accept. But only when the rich man was able to see the error in his ways did the poor man give him the opportunity to give with joy and receive something in return.
And that is very interesting, the with joy thing. And we do have to cut this short. Joy is who I am. So I've had many spiritual readings and been told that that is, when we talk about source and energetic source,
Mm,
that's who I am. And that is real. I mean, if I'm not having, I call it delicious. If it's not delicious,
mm,
then I don't want to do it. Right?
right.
It's got to be delicious, right? And part of being delicious, and you're right, is in the giving. As a leader, my joy as a leader was watching what I could do for my staff, for my team, to
Yeah.
help them grow and achieve. We had flow, because I have a whole speech on flow, because it wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was always about what can I do for them to succeed? What can I do to get roadblocks out of their way? What
Right.
can I do to be sure they have what they need in this moment to do what it is that they need to do?
And it
But
comes back to you.
and it comes back. I had amazing teams. I had amazing people working for me. But Alex, my battery is about to go for some reason. This juice isn't flowing today.
It's all from above.
It's all from above.
All from
Thank you
above.
so much. And
Oh,
how
thank
can
you.
people get in touch with you if they want more?
acethespeaker.com, #living totality. That's where you'll find me. Gail, thank you so much. This was truly a very, very blessed experience. And I wish you all the best. I wish the best for the audience. And let's do this again sometime soon.
We will. And again, Gail Kraft from the Empowering Process podcast. If you love this, give us a thumbs up. Any questions, do put them in the comments. If you know someone who could benefit from this, do share it out. And as
Yes.
always, please subscribe so that you'll know when the next episode is coming out. For now, bye-bye. Bye-bye, Alex.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.